This is a movement of movements. And so I'm going to ask already some of our panel to come up and to start to have a discussion on how can we all play this part. The first is Shiva Dostar, because unfortunately, Marie Toussaint sent me a message last night and has been called to Amiens, where she and her colleagues are actually fighting because there is an announcement of a large closure of an industrial site. Shiva has been working with me at the EIB. She has 30 years of experience, give her a round of applause, in the area of innovative finance, and is very important in terms of the conversation around capital flows. The next person is Emmanuel Mussault from MOVIN'ON, who is coming up with collective solutions in the area of transport and mobility. Give him a round of applause. The next person is Adélaïde Charlier, who is both a climate activist and a youth activist, and a dear co-author in a book that we wrote together, Quel monde pour demain? And the last is my dear daughter, Tessa Dixson, who unfortunately, by playing football yesterday, has sprained her ankle, who will be bringing in the role of artists and of culture as a singer. So, let me start with you, Shiva. You and I have been working on climate action for quite some time, and also on the way in which we can translate not only Earth for All, but the need to shift through capital flows. The EIB is the climate bank, European Investment Bank, for those of you who don't know. You stood up to the plate already several years ago and said, we're going to do this. Where do you feel the greatest barriers and opportunities right now in terms of shifting? And talk a little bit about the reflection also around Earth for All.
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be on this particular panel. Obviously right now, the role of the EIB, I would say, is even probably more important than ever. As the Bank of the European Union, as a long-term investor in not only infrastructure, but also innovation. When it comes to climate change and the barriers, I think it is indeed in both areas. The investment needs are massive. And what you need is an anchor investor, a mission-oriented investor that very much has its, is sort of an anchor investor coming in early and providing that sort of patient capital that then can de-risk, can mobilize massive private investment. Because the main message I would like to leave is that in order to actually make sure that we are developing sustainable infrastructure, having the right climate solutions, and you have so many wonderful right now companies on the other side here, they need investment. But it's not just the private investment, it's not just the public investment like ours that comes in earlier on. We need to nevertheless set the stage and get the pension funds, get all that institutional money in there. And what
How do we do that?
And exactly. And what has now become the challenge is that, of course, and I think as you rightly point out, there is this backlash. There is, unfortunately, in a very polarized society that we have, a view that perhaps we now have more pressing issues. We are seeing the world as a bit like a Maslowian pyramid, perhaps, where, let's maybe first get to peace, let's maybe first defend ourselves. And I think, therefore, a lot of it is indeed in all of us realizing that we cannot sequence it. It's not a matter of now tackling this issue and then there may be the time for climate. The time for climate is very much now.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about, and that's why I'm really thrilled to be on this panel, it is indeed the voices that have not had yet, haven't been heard. Because unfortunately, we live in a world, and I would like to bring also Caroline Perez's Invisible Women quote in here. We live in a world, let's face it, built by men for men. We do absolutely need to build the world of the future for all of us, which definitely brings in the gender lens that we very often sort of just on the side in echo chambers mention. What it means is that we have to now look at an as inclusion as the driver. And I think bringing it up to the Earth for All book, I think the main message of that book is just so important, that if you don't tackle poverty, if you don't tackle inequality, you will not get to there. So coming back to, therefore, the role of the public sector and an institution like ours is to ensure that, yes, that we do invest in social infrastructure, that we invest not only in the infrastructure, but also in the programs. And therefore, I will very briefly mention the role that I currently have at the EIB, which is heading the EIB Institute. We actually have 8 of our green heroes. You may see that they are sponsored by us. These are the Green Tech Heroes. Please do pay them a visit. But what we do is we very much accompany companies early on, and some of the new initiatives that we have right now going on are indeed to give the next generation a voice. So youth engagement is absolutely critical, because an institution like the EIB that invests in projects for over 30 years, if we don't bring in the voice of the youth somehow into the governance, we have failed them. And the other thing, and we now have actually a woman President, Nadia Calvino, for the first time in our 65-year history. So, yes, who is very committed to really this inclusion angle and also women leadership. We do need to really make sure that the women voices are heard. And here I very quickly just say that we just launched a Women Climate Network to just showcase how many women are already actively engaged in climate, so that anybody who tells you, well, we would love to have women voices, but there aren't just any around, you can point out to so many of them that are not only our network, but that are all over, many of them sitting in this
Great.
room.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you on the point of what can we do to help the EIB to stay the course, because politically, and you have boards that are held, your board is also with member states. Many member states are making the decision right now to even protest against the European Green Deal. I'm not saying you are political, because we know that the EIB cannot be, but how can we support you? How can we bring the voices of all those that are here and also the economists and the scientists to keep the EIB on the right track? Because really, you have been our savior in this area for quite some time. So I'm not going to turn to a woman, I'm actually going to turn to a man. Emmanuel, I was actually told, by the way, that I needed to have more men on my panel. But I'm just going to say that, Emmanuel, it's a pleasure to have you as a feministic man. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role of moving on, and in particular shifting mobility? Because, as I said, we're getting full backlash from the fossil fuel industry. We're also, by the way, getting full backlash in terms of the automotive manufacturers in trying to delay the phase out and the ban of the diesel engine and the petrol engine, what we call the ICE, the internal combustion engine. How do we innovate in this area that's so important? And can you reflect a little bit also about public infrastructure, because that also gives some ideas to the EIB.
Well, thank you, Sandrine. It's a great pleasure to be here. Great pleasure to be your male alibi for this discussion. First, let me give you a perspective on where I be talking from. Because as you mentioned it pretty clearly, it takes every single energy, all dimension. It takes a global ecosystem to move things for the better. MOVIN'ON has established itself as an ecosystem, as a trustful and safe space where everyone, corporation, regulators, institutions are welcome to co-design, co-test, co-experiment solution for a more sustainable and desirable mobility for tomorrow. We are developing some what we call coalition of impact and propose solutions to mainly to the regulators. So in order to innovate for the better, we need to identify barriers of innovation, barriers of change. I would mention 4 of them. The one is about being ecosystemic. Although ecosystem, it's the most collective intelligence in nature, in life, when it comes to business, it's not natural to work on, within an ecosystem. Traditional business, as you know, is based on competitive advantage, so competition, more than on collaboration. So when I'm riding the two, we call it co-opetition. And where in the areas where corporations are competing, it's not our business. They are doing their business, and that's fine. Where they want to collaborate, then they come to us, and we work all together. Second, so ecosystem needs trust, and we all talk about creating impact. But it's still, I think we are half the way of defining what real impact is. Impact needs a different focal, and I think that's the barrier number 2.
So the first barrier is competition.
It's working in ecosystem.
Right.
It's collaboration where usually we used to compete. Having the right focal is, I think, is the barrier, or is challenge number 2. Creating impacts goes beyond your own activity. It even goes beyond your own ecosystem. It's E plus S plus G. It's not okay. It's fine to calculate your carbon footprint and so on, but you can have other positive externalities that you don't count, while you can have negative externalities that you will count twice, 3 times, and so on. So how to keep it global, how to keep it holistic. I can tell you on a personal basis, I've been very much inspired by medicine and by integrative medicine. In medicine, they have this focal, this holistic focal. I'm dreaming about maturing an integrative economy. That's what we are aiming for. Another challenge or barrier which has to be identified is changing mindset. But I think you introduced that as well. First of all, when it comes to mobility, the best way to address mobility is not to address mobility in itself. We used to say it's about going from A to B, but okay, we can improve it marginally, but how can we disrupt it with this? To me, mobility is about accessing to health, accessing to culture, accessing to education, accessing to work, accessing to nutrition. And if we give ourselves this wider perspective, there's lots of other approaches. Why not bringing knowledge, education to us? Actually, what we learned from COVID with remote work is something different. I'm not saying we should change it all at once.
And then number 4, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the timing.
Yeah, number 4 is running the transition. And we are in between transition, and we know that transition is the most difficult time where traditional business is giving us return on investment, while new business is only bringing us uncertainty and investment. So how do we run this transition, and how do we get forward? I might get back on it.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the focus on creating these ecosystems and looking beyond mobility itself. I really appreciate that, and then shifting towards the transition. Adélaïde, what are some of your thoughts coming from the youth perspective, of course, but also your feelings of, I know in the conversations we have that things are not going fast enough.
It's obviously not a feeling, right? It's facts. It's not going fast enough. So I think first the challenges is very clear. We're not there, okay? All of this is very beautiful, but it's still theory. In practice, we are in a shit show. We are not making it, and so we have to be clear that whatever is on our ambition right now is still ambition.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Speaking truth to power. Oops.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. And then knowing also, and you know it, the reality that we are facing multiple crises, right? And we are just going to continue to face multiple crises. It's not going to stop. Like, we have seen it, we have heard it, we had COVID, we have our geopolitical tensions now. We have to face that. We have to take our responsibility there. But we cannot forget our long-term vision, right? So we need a political system where we are able to not only react to multi-crises, which are going to continue happening, but also with a long-term vision. And this is what's missing in the political level, right? On the political system, for that, I believe the best option and the best opportunity we have here is to reform this political system with the inclusion of citizens in a systemic way. And that's obviously also the inclusion of young people. It's what I've seen for the past 5 years. I've been so interested. I've been wanting to be included, not myself, but with the movement of young people, not only in Belgium, but across the world. We said, you know what, we are in the streets because it's not going fast enough. Not only are we in the streets, we have ideas. We want to contribute. We want to be part of this change. But we are not included. So even if you have the will, you are excluded. So willing is not enough to be engaged in the change. We need structural place to make sure we are included, right? So those are the opportunities that we have to put in place. Our role, or my role that I see personally as a 23-year-old from Belgium, based in Brussels, with a climate movement, is that first, the climate movement should not only talk about climate. It's over. We said it, it's about a multi-crisis. We have to talk about structural change. So climate is one of it, it's part of it, but if you only see climate, you are going to fail your transition, right? If we're climate neutral in 2050, but with a social revolution and geopolitical tension across the world, we failed. So it's not only about climate, okay? And our opportunity and what we shall do as young, but even citizens in general, is we have to hold people into account. This is our role, right? This is what we have to do. And to do that, we need to give the information. And that's the challenging part, is that we're not really aware, because we're not really included, we don't really know what's going on, right? We don't really know what we should target, where we can actually, who we can hold into account and for what. So this is the role we're trying to play in Belgium, right? It's trying to make this bridge between young people who are willing to get engaged, who are ready to contribute, and political institutions or private institutions, making sure that there is a constant pressure towards them. And for that, I'll just give a quick example. For example, on the CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy. This is super important because obviously with also the farmers' movement going on across Europe right now. The CAP was reformed a few years ago on the European level, right? And it's the biggest budget of the EU, right? So it's a huge deal and huge amounts of money. Right now, this common agricultural policy is going one way, which is saying, produce, produce, produce massively. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And on the other side, we are having a green deal, a green policy with the farm-to-fork policy, for those who are a bit experts into this subject here, who are saying, okay, but we have to do it differently, smaller farms, respect our land, respect farmers, and then that means that actually we do it differently. Those are two different objectives. It just doesn't work together. It's not possible, right? So today I believe we cannot face a transition without reforming the CAP. So anyways, in this context, we have been super active. It's super hard to understand, it's super complex, but we have amazing experts like Sandrine and others who are helping us to understand what's going on. And then we're using the democratic tools, which are not sufficient, but we're using the ones that we have access to make sure that we have a voice. So we stood in the middle of COVID every single day in front of the European Commission with activists there to demand to withdraw the CAP and put one on the table that is aligned to the farm-to-fork policy. We have met commissioners constantly. We have brought farmers to also meet commissioners. We have failed, right? But you have to know that inside the European Parliament, they have used our, like they have seen our movement. They have seen we were there. We were so huge that, I don't know, like because it was COVID, so Twitter was super important. We were the top 1 hashtag on Twitter, super crucial, because we need to be part of this subject, right? It's the only tool we have. So we were one of the main arguments in the discussion inside the Parliament. And this is where we want to be. We want to be in part of that. So using that example to show you exactly concretely what we're trying to do. But now we have to do the same thing with reforming our economical system.
Yes.
But that's another subject. Right?
That's
we'll
another
go into that after
conversation.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adé. Really appreciate. We really need to make sure that we continue to support the voice of youth. I mean, and not only the voice, but the intelligence. I mean, let's give another round of applause for all of the young men and women, especially women, that started the climate activism across Europe, and so many other women across the board. By the way, I just want to say conversations that I've had with these climate activists, with Luisa, who's coming as well from Germany, with Adélaïde, every single time they say to us, you know, we can go out without any risk to our lives, but the number of other women that are doing the same thing across the globe, who actually risk their lives every single day to fight for what they believe, including indigenous women that are getting killed left, right, and center right now in the forests of Brazil and across Latin America and the Congo. So let's make sure that we remember to support these incredible young people. Now, Tessa, we have moved from public investment and the need to have strong institutional investment into mobility and creating ecosystems of mobility, into the importance of not tokenizing the youth voice and ensuring that we build movements. But to be frank, recently, we've seen the Taylor effect. The Taylor Swift effect has been phenomenal. And we know that we are not, exactly as Adé has said, getting to where we need to be in terms of bringing more people on the journey. How do we use arts and culture? How do we use performers like yourself, not only who embody the change, because you have reduced your consumption patterns, you do everything you can to be your own climate activists, but also to sing about the change, to talk about the change to people that we cannot reach.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And I think the main subject that really speaks to me is having a voice. I mean, we all kind of talked about it. And I think as a public figure, we have to use our platform to talk about these things and let the common person know what is happening. Let them convey a message and make a difference with how we say things and how we put things forward. Obviously, it can go through our art and through our music and through our platforms. But I think for me, I want to thank you for being such a powerful voice, especially in Belgium, coming from Belgium as well. We need people like you. We need women like you in our generation to embody the change. Because obviously, I think a lot of people, as myself, feel powerless in this system that has been built that kind of take advantage of us, in a sense. And the thing that I want to address is these systems can be brought down because they rely on us. We have the power, and we can change these systems by talking, engaging in conversations, going out in the streets. Can go into fashion as well. I mean, I'm wearing a brand, a French brand, emerging brand, that use recycled materials. And I think it's important to put art at the forefront of this movement as well. But basically, just everything comes together and saying we need to change now. It has to happen now, because if we don't, it'll be too late.
Thank you, Tess, for that very real message. And I appreciate the fact that you've brought in a brand, and we've got Nina out here, and incredible fair, by the way. Any of you who are interested in fashion, go to London in June. Incredible sustainable textile fair, the best that I've been to, and I've been collaborating with Nina and her colleagues for quite some time. really, it's important to walk the talk and to work with some of the biggest fast fashion producers to really shift them while we also speak to them about what we think is the future. Now, I want to take all of us into that moment of hope, but also the moment of despair. Because, to be fair, those of us who work in this area constantly vacillate between despair and hope. And I brought Tessa to the stage, apart from the fact that I'm incredibly proud of her as a mother, but more because I'm proud of her in the fact that she's embodied some of the things that I've been trying to instill in myself and my family into her own art. But she also talks about the hurt. We need to talk about the hurt. I was actually taking a Eurostar to Paris 3 weeks ago, and a man that was sitting to my right turned to me and said, "You may not remember me, but I actually have come to several of your presentations and have been so inspired by you that I brought my daughter to your presentation a year ago. And she actually has become increasingly a climate activist." But then he started crying. He started crying because she had given up. And she'd been checked into a hospital because she tried to take her life. This is the flip side of the hard work that we have every single day. This is the flip side of the growing climate anxiety, the growing mental illness. And thank God both myself and Adélaïde were able to support her when we found out that she was so troubled. We have to build a community of hope. It is our responsibility to cry together, to fight together, and to build the future together.